Welcome to Porn Talk. This is Powerful Eric. This show is not just about breaking addictions. It's about breaking belief systems. We are bound by self-imposed and societal chains. Break those rusty, nasty old chains and get empowered right now. Today, I've got an awesome guest that you are going to love. He is going to help break these chains. His name is Frank Rich. Frank is a former bodybuilder, entrepreneur, men's health coach, and the host of the Superhuman Life podcast. After living with and battling addiction, depression, and anxiety for almost 20 years, he's now on a mission to help men who are suffering from the same issues take back control of their lives through the power of faith and fitness. He's also the founder and CEO of Rebuilt Recovery, a company based on a growth-centric, holistic approach to addiction recovery. His goal is that by being open and transparent, that he can empower you to face your darkness, take control, and ultimately create the life you've always dreamed of on your own. He is the founder of Rebuilt Recovery. He is the host of the Superhuman Life. Welcome, Frank Rich. Welcome, Frank.
Eric, my brother, so good to be here, man. Thank you.
I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to have you. For those that don't know you, can you tell us a little bit of your story?
Absolutely, man. And I just want to acknowledge you, man, because that intro, like, if people really understood the power of what is going on inside of that intro, it would radically transform their life. Not only you were telling me about the powerful Eric, like you've been telling yourself this for so many years, now you have another voice repeating this time and time again into your ear, into your subconscious programming. And I hope we can kind of get into all that, man. That was an incredibly powerful intro, and I just love what you're doing, man. I love the way your brain works. I'm really excited about this conversation. No, man. So yeah, I think, my path to what I'm doing today started when I was 6 years old. I stumbled across a Hustler magazine in my dad's sock drawer. Taught me a lot of different things, though. Right then and there, I've really been trying to understand how this shaped the trajectory of my life. Number one, there was this sense of curiosity, right, with the female body at such a young, ripe age, not knowing why this woman in this image made me feel any different than any other body that I want. But that set me on this cascade of almost 30-year addiction. But what it also did, Eric, and I think I was telling you this before we hit record, is it began to shape my identity as somebody that could keep secrets, and it was okay to do that, right? Because my dad had secrets from my mom. My dad had secrets from us. These were things that he was consuming and participating in that he never talked about with any of us. So it set me down this path where it didn't matter what I was doing, through school. I was, an A-plus student, multiple varsity sports letters, and I got into my 20s, started having some success in the corporate world, started getting into leadership training, running teams of 65, 80 people, when I was 22, 23 years old, like things that I would have never thought I would be doing. And then I got into bodybuilding, had some success there, like really learned the power of discipline, work ethic, delayed gratification, putting things off for the longer call. But at the same time, I had all these secrets in my life. I had this behavior, I had this addiction. I had what I thought was just an odd sexual compulsion that I wasn't really willing to talk about with anybody else. And then a series of moments, really transformed my life in my mid-30s. And number one is getting around some really strong, influential men. That I saw guys that were real men of integrity, guys that put others first, were men of service, were men of honor, respect. Faith was a big driver in all their lives as well. Giving my life to Christ was a very integral part of my journey as well. But then there came a moment on February 14th, 2019, when I was sitting in a car with a Marine friend of mine. Somebody I had a lot of respect for and spent a lot of time with 2 years leading up to that point. He started telling me about some breathing exercise that he was doing that was helping him harness his sexual energy and how it was helping him stay off of porn. And up until that point in my life, Eric, I had never talked to another grown man about pornography addiction, about struggles, about lust, about our inability to really manage these things. But there was a weight that I felt lifted off of me in that car. By him opening up, I felt now was my time if I was really going to change who I was and changed the trajectory of my life, that I needed to be started to be open and honest with people in my life. So right there, I confessed to him, 20 plus years I've been struggling with this. At this point, I'd spent maybe 3 to 4 months trying to understand the brain and is there really an addiction tied to this? Like I said, I never really thought about it as an addiction. I'm like, I'm just an overly sexual person and this is where I go to satisfy it. And yeah, it's a little odd that I'm watching porn in some of the places that I was, and I would, miss social gatherings. I'd stay at home, or oftentimes I would go out only to want to come back home and end the night in front of a screen.
Yeah.
But by me opening up there, I felt something change inside of me, and it set me down the path where I just wanted to tell everybody. So for like the next 6 weeks, I literally like scheduled meetings, appointments, Zoom calls with all my friends, and just started telling them like, hey, I've been struggling with this, but I'm working and I'm committed to overcoming it. And there was an interesting thing that happened, because I had a lot of fear, especially in the beginning with Zach. Like, what's he gonna say? How's he gonna judge me? Zach opened up his arms, gave me a massive hug, and he's like, dude, it's gonna be okay. Like, a lot of men are struggling with this. Most men are struggling with this. It's gonna be okay. And then the same thing happened. And it didn't matter if I was having a conversation with a doctor, a CEO, a professional athlete, an everyday, father, a church leader. Like, it didn't matter who they were. The reaction from them was always the same. The arm went around me and said, it's gonna be okay. You took the biggest step though, Frank, with owning it, with admitting it, and then taking the responsibility that you were gonna change your life. So that's a little, 3.5 years ago. 90 days kind of went by, that rebooting, recovery phase, when your brain begins to kind of reset. You begin to see yourself a whole lot differently. That led me to launching the podcast in July of 2019, really just to put my story out there in the world. I didn't know a lot about porn addiction. I didn't know that there was as much podcasts and coaches and other people like yourself that were out there, but I saw an opportunity with somebody that had achieved a level of success in his life, but also was struggling with it. Like, I had tools, man. I had studied personal development. I'd studied human performance. I'd studied human nature, psychology. Like, I thought I had the keys to success, and I'm still struggling with addiction. What about the guys that haven't gone down the path of education that I've gone down? What about the guys that are maybe don't have as much discipline and willpower because they haven't been forced to develop that in themselves? Maybe they could benefit from hearing some of the things that I was doing. So the original podcast was really just to put my story and others out there into the world. And that led us 6 months later, we're getting a lot of inquiries and requests for coaching. So on July 28th of 2020, that was really the soft launch of Rebuilt Recovery, just seeing if I had what it took to help men. So the first 6 months was, from the coaching perspective, was really just walking guys alongside, literally side by side with them. And now we built that into a curriculum. We have a course available, group coaching, one-on-one coaching, everything in between. And it's been tremendous, man. And I think, like I told you, my mission and purpose here is to eradicate the world of pornography addiction, and realizing like I'm going to need relationships with men just like yourself and the audience here today to actually make that successful.
Well, I appreciate you telling your story. What was the very bottom for you? What was like one of the darkest times for you with porn addiction?
Yeah, man. There were a couple of them, man, and I don't know if it was directly due to the porn addiction, but I think it was the mental state that I was in as a byproduct of the porn addiction. But there was one particular moment. I've been talking about this a lot recently. It's been coming up. I was competing in a world bodybuilding kind of fitness modeling show in downtown Orlando. Something I'd worked, years and decades to get to the point where I could even walk across that stage and hold my own. I put a lot of pressure on myself to win. And I placed third, which, is an incredible feat with some of the physiques that were on stage there with me. But I can remember being in my suite that night. I'd been dating a beautiful woman, also a competitor. She was one of the best in the world in her class and division. And I can just remember feeling like I had let so many people down, but most importantly, let myself down. That when it was time to go to bed, she slept by herself, and I literally stayed up on the couch all night, binge eating, watching porn, and thinking about killing myself. I told you before we record that I was a very early adopter of BlackBerry. So I worked in the wireless industry in my early 20s. This is like the Motorola Razr days, just
Hmm.
to kind of date myself a
Yep.
little bit.
Yep. I
But
know Fraser.
I was one of the first people to have a color screen BlackBerry, and I can remember literally within an hour finding the drug that I'd been sneaking around to get. For 15 years leading up to that, it's now in my pocket whenever I needed it. So I've sat inside of a Dillard's, Macy, or Nordstrom public restroom hundreds of times, concerned with what is the person next to me gonna hear, but just not even really caring while I'm watching porn and pleasuring myself. I think those are probably some of the lowest moments when you're literally worried, like, is somebody gonna come in? Am I gonna get caught? Like, there's a person literally sitting next to me. They have no clue what I'm going through. Or what I'm even doing. So that would probably be the lowest, man, is those points, within the public spaces.
Yeah, it's crazy how things have changed. When I think of when I remember when the BlackBerry came out, it had the little keyboard on there, and
Mm-hmm.
I remember telling one of my friends, "Why would you need to access your email from your phone? That's ridiculous. Like, who's that busy that?" And
Yeah.
now I, I'm constantly, checking my phone, my email on my phone, and then of course having the world's largest library of pornography
Yeah.
at your fingertips now.
Yeah, but they're speaking. So that really points to the power of neuroplasticity, though, right? What fires together wires together. Less than 20 years ago, nobody was checking their phone, email or social media. Social media wasn't even around. In a very short window, less than 2 decades, it's like every human being has been wired, conditioned, and it's almost our default pattern of behavior is that when we're bored, the phone comes out and we're trying to find something to entertain. And that's only a product of behavioral conditioning passed down from parents to kids, and then you do something long enough, it just becomes an automatic, default response for yourself.
Yeah. I tell that to I've got a 7-year-old son and a 3-year-old son. And I tell my 7-year-old sometimes, he might be bored or whatever. And I was like, that's fine. Be bored. You don't have to be
Mm-hmm.
entertained every moment of your life, nor should you
Should
be
you?
entertained every moment of your life. So I'm like, just be bored, sit with that.
Yeah, it reminds me of a video. This was one of our early YouTube videos back when we went all in on YouTube in July 28th of 2020, and we haven't missed a day since of putting at least one video on YouTube. But there was an interesting one where I was in a meditation setting or journaling, and I was like, these guys just need to stop trying things. Just do nothing. Like, doing nothing is the path to overcoming your porn addiction. And I was able to create a little 10-minute kind of video around kind of what I was really speaking to there. But it's learning to just sit and be present and be alone and not be anxious, not be insecure, not needing some type of stimulus. I think one of the hardest things for most people is just to sit in your own thoughts. And if you're struggling with an addiction, if you have behaviors that you're not really proud about, that is going to become even darker to sit in, because when you're alone and you're not being stimulated, what comes to the surface? All the things about yourself that you don't like. But if you could learn to sit in that for a little bit, I think there's real power in doing that.
Absolutely. Because as you know, it's not about the porn. It's
Nope.
not about the porn. It's not about the porn. It's a symptom. We're using
Mm-hmm.
it to numb, cope, and escape. And then if we sit there without doing anything, our challenges that we have may come up, and we may actually have to feel our feelings.
Mm.
Imagine that, feeling your feelings.
Yeah. Are you a Jordan Peterson fan by
I
any reason?
love him. I know
Yeah.
some people don't like him, which I don't get, but I love him. I think he's great.
Yeah, well, he talks a lot about facing your demons and dragons, right? And when those thoughts come up when you're in alone, those are your demons, those are your dragons. And I believe men, we're called to conquer those dragons and demons. Little boys are scared of the demon in the closet, right? They're scared of the dragon underneath their bed. So if we could learn to sit, be present, and realize, like, if something is coming to us, that's probably because it needs to be figured out, solved, overcome, not just suppressed down and then pushed deep down, because at some point it's going to get to the point where it's gone all the way to the bottom and it's going to erupt. And I'm sure you have moments like this where you've been very destructive, anger, tantrums, and all that. That's a byproduct of just not being able to sit and listen at certain times.
Absolutely. Talking about the dragon, we are trying to slay the porn dragon, slaying the porn dragon. And, when I started the podcast, I had my little mascot made up, little wiener man, Raging Richard. And initially I wanted to have him to be a monster. That was like when I was talking to the characters, the guy drawing the wiener man for me, that I wanted him to be like the porn monster. And he evolved instead of being the porn monster to being Raging Richard. And because of my anger that I uncovered after I stopped masturbating to porn. And so I agree with you on slaying the porn dragon. And though it's evolved for me a little bit, and like you were saying, it's there to teach us. There's something there for us to learn. So it's not so much, it's like, why is this porn monster here? Like what is he trying to teach us? There's a lesson here. And as Napoleon Hill from Think and Grow Rich likes to say, in any failure or adversity is the seed of an equal or greater positive benefit.
Love that. So, another powerful book there, the Think and Grow Rich one. I don't want to challenge you, Eric, but I want to maybe see if there's a little bit different way that we can look at this. I think looking at pornography as a monster is giving it too much credit. I think that's putting it up on a pedestal, like that this thing is really, really strong. I think the monster is inside of us that we need to conquer. And I think in the path of doing that, we realize that like this thing that we thought had power over us, this is your story, right? You felt you were powerless over it, and then you had to reverse that and say, I'm the powerful one. So I'm the one that's going to overcome the monster inside of me. The pornography is not the monster. That's what I'm running to when the monster in my life is coming up at me. So just a little bit different of a way, but I see a lot of men, they do that though. They put the pornography up so high on a pedestal that it's this thing that we're never going to be able to conquer. And just that thought is so limiting to growth, to potential, and the ability to transform our lives. So I'm glad you landed on the little penis angry guy. I think that's a lot better than a monster, because like I said, I think the monster is just giving it too much credit and too much power.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. That was my original thing, was that it was the monster, but then I learned that this has come to teach me something.
Yes.
It's here to teach me something. And what is that? And it's different for everyone. So, Frank, why don't most recovery programs or support groups work with helping men find freedom from pornography?
It's a great question, Eric. And I think it's not so much the program. I think most men fail due to lack of internal beliefs. So the programs are maybe not centered around, in my opinion, what is the actual path to recovery? What is the actual path to overcoming this? Because just piggybacking off of what we were talking about, too many people or too many programs or support focus on pornography as a problem instead of internalizing and realizing, say, hey, there's problems inside of me that I need to work through. I need to grow and evolve and become better. And then in doing so, I'm going to kick this little problem to the habit or to the curb. I can say, in the experience that I've had with like your traditional support groups, is it's just a bunch of weak men sitting around kind of like patting each other on the back and saying it's gonna be okay. And yeah, it is gonna be okay, but it needs to be okay right now. And if you've had a pattern of repeating the same mistake over and over again, it's not a mistake, it's a choice. So yeah, I want you to know I'm gonna support you, but I'm also going to challenge you to level up. So I think there's a lack of accountability in a lot of programs, in a lot of support groups, because hey, it's every man's problem, right? So this thing is so powerful. It's got this monster, it's got this dragon and demon that is so big that we may not actually ever be able to conquer it. So I think it's just very limiting from, once again, putting the pornography so high up on a pedestal, but then also not having the internal belief within ourselves that we can transcend this, we can overcome through an element of identity change, through an element of personal responsibility to conquering our internal demons.
Yeah. What you're talking about reminds me for some reason of like back in the day, like my grandpa, for example, World War II guy, and these guys went through some really serious, hard times, and I think back in the day too, like they didn't have way back, no air conditioning, maybe no refrigerator, maybe you had an outhouse to go to instead of a car, you had a horse, and there were some rugged men that had to deal with a lot of stuff that we just take for granted for, like, indoor plumbing, for example. I'm just going to go and get a drink of water. And what I'm leading up to here, you said something about, maybe I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but, weak men. And I grew up, when I was a teenager in the 80s, that was the most affluent time in U.S. history. And there were no wars going on. And I was soft. I was super, super soft. I'd come home from school and watch TV and, would have maybe some chores to do. But I look back and I think, man, I was such a soft person. And, now, then I chose pornography to soothe myself. Are men today softer than they used to be?
Oh, 100%. I mean, like, that's not even, like, we don't even need my opinion around that. Let's just pull up a research study on hormone levels and testosterone of men today. So the average, I believe it's the average 25 to 30-year-old today has the testosterone levels of a 60-year-old just 40 years ago in 1980. So that in of itself is a crippling thing to the men and to the world, as we just have weak, effeminate men that are just lower levels of testosterone. Testosterone is the hormone that makes men men. Like, it is one of the primary, drivers of our drive, our ambition, our strength, our ability to seek adversity. Those are masculine traits that are a byproduct of testosterone. I mean, the world is, we live in a microwave society. You want anything, you push a button and it shows up. I'm hungry, push button, food shows up. We don't have to go out and hunt and kill. We don't even have to go to the store anymore. Literally everything can come to our front door. I love the way that John Eldredge, I don't know if you're familiar with John Eldredge, he wrote Wild at Heart, a couple other great books. He's in the men's kind of masculine from a faith perspective. But in the book Wild at Heart, he has this quote or line where he talks about what makes pornography so dangerously destructive to young men is it gives them everything they desire sexually from a woman without requiring anything back of in return. If you think about, like, in previous times, and this is also social media culture, right? Like, you want to hook up, you want to have sex tonight. I could go on Tinder and probably match with 30 women in the next hour and probably have multiple dates lined up here tonight. And the chances are, if I'm in the right app and I play my cards correctly, I would be able to sleep with one of them. And that's not what I'm encouraging anybody to go and do. But it's getting to this point where, like, men of the old, like, they had to protect, they had to provide financial safety, security for the people, women most importantly in their life, in order to actually be able to get intimate relationships with them. But nowadays we can sit behind a screen, feel like we're getting relationship. This is where OnlyFans is massively destructive, because it brings in that back and forth exchange. So it can feel like we have a relationship, we get everything we want, we get the release, but we don't ever have to show up in the world as a real man of purpose, as a man of protection, as a man of just being a valuable resource. I think men are called to be resources to the rest of the world, and we're not seeing that. We're seeing men as consumers. They're consuming TikTok, social media, pornography, junk food, NFL games on Sunday. Like, it's a consumer-based society instead of a creative, production-based society.
The study that you were talking about with the testosterone, what was the conclusion of the study that the big difference of testosterone levels from the 20-year-olds?
Yeah, there's a lot of different reasons around it. I mean, I think that study was trying to understand the products that we're consuming. So, skincare products, food, processed food, fertilizers, like all these things have phytoestrogens. So there's a lot of science and research that I'm not really too keen on. But I think that's what they were really trying to drive is how is our just lifestyle, living indoors, not getting sun exposure, sitting behind a screen, getting poor sleep. So it's really a byproduct of the way that people are living is what's producing these things. Like I think pursuits like pursuits of a podcast, pursuits of writing books, pursuits of creating enterprises for the world. Like once again, that drives men and that will shape us. And I gotta assume like that is what's keeping men as little boys, because there's no need for men to grow up in the world because everything is available at the push of a button.
Yeah, yeah. And talk about just sitting behind a computer or looking at your phone. I mean, there's very little physical activity, I would presume, would be one of the contributing factors to that lower testosterone for sure.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely, yes. We all live a sedentary lifestyle. I don't know what the actual number is, but I would assume that the average person probably moves maybe 4,000 to 5,000 steps per day. It's like a lot of people put this goal of like 10,000. Like I'm at 10,000 steps most days by 1 o'clock, and I work indoors. I'm just very aware and intentional about constantly being moving. I mean, I'm standing up right now just because I would rather be here than seated for this hour. So yeah, the sedentary lifestyle is definitely leading us to that.
So let's move into more of the solution here. So for those of you that don't know, my story in a nutshell, I was addicted to porn for decades. I went to 12-step meetings where they have you say you're powerless over the addiction. And I said that for almost 2 decades. And then on a whim, I was creating a login and password for this mindfulness app to break addictions. And I thought, I'm going to put Powerful Eric as my login. Not they, Powerful Eric died. Powerless Eric died, and Powerful Eric was born. And I don't call myself that out of ego. It's out of having called myself a piece of shit and powerless for decades. And so that identity change was crucial and critical for me. That is what I didn't realize at the time would completely change my life. And so can you speak to identity change?
Absolutely, man. I love that. I love that so much. I mean, that sits at the root and foundation of all the work that I do. Like we have this, called tagline or sentence that has kind of become, really the tagline for Rebuilt Recovery, which is my company, and it's that in order to overcome your addiction to pornography, you must become the man that is no longer addicted to porn. And there's a lot of emphasis that I put in that word in that word become. And I think that is the process that we must go through in order to successfully remove this out of our life forever. Can you white knuckle it and go 30, 60, 90 days? Absolutely. Can you go six months, a year? I've had a lot of conversations with men that literally they would become so isolated in their life that if they weren't working, sleeping, or eating, they were just doing everything they possibly could to not think about pornography. That's not a man that's changing his identity. That's a man that's just saying, yes, this thing is so big and powerful over me. I think all successful transformation is rooted in a successful identity change. You want to lose weight, you must stop identifying as a person that eats junk food. You want to transform your business, you must identify as a successful entrepreneur. You want to create more intimate and meaningful relationships. You can no longer identify as a person that can't hold or keep a relationship. So the path to overcoming your pornography addiction starts with an internal belief first, and we must not identify and raise our hand every day and say, yes, I'm an addict, I'm powerless. Admit you're an addict in the beginning, admit that there's things about you that what you're doing need to be changed, but then instantly begin to shape your identity becoming this new person.
I love how you said at the beginning, we need to do that.
Yes.
I totally agree. At the beginning, we need to say, hey, I've got a problem here.
Mm-hmm.
I can't stop masturbating to porn. You have to acknowledge the problem.
Yep.
And what I found in the 12-step meetings for almost 20 years, when, by the way, I went to Sexual Compulsives Anonymous, I went to Sexaholics Anonymous, I went to Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, I was not an alcoholic, but I went to Alcoholics Anonymous, I went to Debtors Anonymous, I went to CODA. I mean, became a professional 12-stepper, and I can tell you this is what happens, is we go into these meetings and we say, hi, my name is Eric, I'm a sexaholic, and I'm powerless over porn. So I say that in the beginning, which is necessary. But then we keep saying it over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And what happens is guys start to identify with it, including me. That when I would be brushing my teeth at night, I'm looking at myself in the mirror going, yeah, that's me, the porn addict. And, and also the 12 steps, they say it's a disease. So I have this disease, and I have this disease for life. Even if I stop all the behaviors, I have this disease for life. And it is such an unempowering, it's such a sad way to live. So, yes, in the beginning, we need to recognize there is a problem, but not to then identify with the problem.
Well, Eric, the subconscious mind is, I think it's so much more powerful than most people can fully understand or even wrap their head around. Our subconscious mind, it processes 11 million data points of information per second. Our conscious mind processes only 40. Not 40 million, 40. But what does this mean to somebody that's hearing that? What that means is that when you look out into the world, what you see and experience, your reality is driven by an 11 million from a subconscious level to a 40 ratio. The way that you respond and react in the moments of stress, anxiety, like autonomic arousal, not when you're like fully conscious aware, because our subconscious mind is driving so much. Once again, it's 11 million to 40. So if you're constantly telling yourself consciously that you are an addict, that is literally hardwiring, ingraining that internal belief subconsciously. So there's gonna come a point when you're tired, stressed, life is just overwhelming, work, relationships, all these things that we cannot manage is gonna get to the point where you're now begin to operate on an autopilot level. And the only purpose of your subconscious mind is to make your reality match the identity. So if you're identifying as a porn addict somewhere down the road, this is known as self-sabotage, right? When I'm doing things to prevent myself from getting where I'm trying to go. But it's happening underneath the hood. We're not consciously doing this because we're driving that internal belief. I'm an addict, I'm an addict, I'm an addict, I'm an addict. Then something's gonna happen somewhere down the road. Your subconscious mind says, you tell yourself an addict, that's not how you're living right now. Let's make sure we get you to do the behaviors and actions that are gonna make your reality aligned with what you're telling yourself from the identity perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And the challenging thing is that most recovery programs, most therapists, of course, the 12-step programs, they use the disease-based model of addiction, and that says you have a disease and you have this for life.
Yeah, either that or the trauma stuff, right? Like this is one that I hear a lot of, right? Is something happened to me when I was a little boy. Dad was angry. I didn't have a great relationship. I was sexually, and I'm not saying any of that is a good thing. Like I'm not here to not have empathy for what people have gone through, but that happened, and it happened is what happened. Like you cannot be the driver for the rest of your life. This is something I'm seeing a lot, like in the personal development, self-help space. It's like we become we attach onto these trauma ways of thinking and living. It's like, once again, it becomes the identity of which we're seeing the world. I'm a trauma person, I'm a trauma victim, so I can never fully succeed in the way that everybody else is doing it. You want to change your life though, realize, okay, who would you need in that moment to prevent that from happening, and just become that person. Like, once again, it's rooted in an identity change, but I'm seeing it with the disease, and I'm seeing it with trauma as well in a lot of the conversations that we've been having.
Are you familiar with Dr. Joe Dispenza?
I love Joe's work, yeah.
Oh, man. What title of one of his books is, it's about not become, help me with the title.
Becoming Supernatural, I think is what it is.
Yeah,
right?
There's one, that's one. And there's the other one about basically becoming a new person forget the title, but anyway, his work I'm going in depth with for various reasons. And that's his work, is identity change. It's identity change. And if somebody tries to break their porn addiction without really changing their identity, um, they're going to use all these tools, techniques, and tactics, which can be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But in the long term, they're probably not going to have long-term success without having that core shift inside, right?
Absolutely, and that's where you'll see, like in some circles, like in the in the business. I spent a lot of time in kind of the business entrepreneurship space. It's just been a world that I've been in for a long time. I do some business coaching in addition to what we're doing at Rebuild Recovery. You hear a lot of the fake it till you make it conversation, right? Like fake your success online, fake all of these other things, and it's like no, just become those things. And I think that there's elements of that is like you have this arsenal, like you're walking around with a toolkit of like trigger, oh, let me do some breathing. Trigger, let me do something else. Let me just constantly keep my mind overstimulated on other things. All can be successful tools, but if it's not rooted in the actual change of an identity, then eventually you're going to use all the tools and you're going to get to the point where we've already talked about it, right? The subconscious is going to want to sabotage because it wants to create the reality in line with the identity that we're holding.
One of the other solutions that you brought up too was breathing. I'm really a huge advocate of breath work. And are you familiar with Wim Hof at all?
Very familiar. Yeah. So actually, when I was having the conversation with Zach, it was the breathing exercise that he was studying and learning from Wim Hof. So I have a cold exposure. I literally have an ice barrel sitting on my patio right now. I'm a big fan of the cold plunge, cold exposure. But yeah, Wim he's the best.
Yeah, I've had a lot of success personally and with my clients with breath work. If you're struggling with porn or sex addiction, man, breath work is so powerful. It
Yeah.
is so powerful. And, I talk about brain cookies. Like, when we view pornography, the dopamine and all that stuff people get into, I call it brain cookies. And I say, your brain is going to get those brain cookies one way or another. You can either give it to them healthfully or unhealthfully. And man, I get massive doses of brain cookies from doing the Wim Hof method, cold exposure, and the breathing. Oh my gosh, it sends me to the moon.
Absolutely, man. I love that, and I mean that's why I do it. 250% increase of I think it's 3 minutes in sub 45-degree water will produce a 250% increase over a sustained period. That's what's even better about it, right? Is like with pornography, you'll get a hit of dopamine and it's gone like within the next couple of seconds. With something like a cold exposure, you start your day on that. It's like you feel like you're literally getting these drips and releases like throughout the entire day. Incredibly powerful. There's another way of breathing though that I think is really practical that can help people. So I got this from Dr. Andrew Huberman, who oversees the research lab at Stanford. Huberman Lab, incredible podcast. He talks a lot about a term known as a physiological sigh. It's something that our body naturally does. Animals do it as well, but we can regulate this ourselves. So we can induce a physiological sigh. And how you would do it is it's a double inhale. So it's a normal inhale through your nose, followed by a very short second one. So before I would exhale, I would and then have a very short second inhale and then a long, slow, controlled release. And what they were able to discover in the study that they were doing at the Stanford lab is 2 or 3 of these literally in real time will lower your autonomic arousal. So our autonomic nervous system, like fight or flight, right? Stress, anxiety, fear, like this produces elevated heart rate, anxiety, maybe sweaty palms. That's just your nervous system is in an autonomic arousal state through the power of breath. Because our diaphragm sits literally at the center of our ability to control this system, we can bring that down. And all it takes literally is 2 to 3 physiological sighs. So a double inhale followed by a slow controlled exhale has been shown and studied that it will reduce your heart rate. It'll bring that autonomic arousal down. So if you're struggling with something, there's a real-time tool while you're in the process of changing your identity that can help with some of the triggers, stresses, and urges that men are going through.
Frank, let's do it now, man. Let's sigh together.
Let's do it.
So first, if you can demonstrate for me, and then I'll go. Okay.
Absolutely. Yep. So I'm going to go.
Okay.
Allow the first inhale to be a little bit longer, almost like a real natural inhale. And then the second one is a very short. And what it's doing is, so our lungs are pockets. And normally it's a pocket fills, pocket closes, pocket fills, pocket closes. But with that second inhale, you get this rapid increase of like oxygen into those pockets within your lungs. And then the slow exhale. So
Got it. So a little longer in the beginning, and then short on the second one, then a long out. Okay, here I go. Here I go. Was I better on that one?
Yeah, that was good. Yeah. How did that feel?
Good. And it's funny. I mean, that's a natural thing that people, people sigh, and it's a natural thing to make.
Yeah, so it is an unconscious breathing pattern that we just naturally will do. But the amazing thing with breath, man, is it's one of the only things that we do at an unconscious level that we have the ability to take full conscious control over.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're doing it. I mean, if you have a pet, you'll see your pet do it sometimes too.
What's crazy? I've been studying meditation for really most of my life, and it doesn't matter who's teaching it. It doesn't matter what country it's from. They every single one talk about breath. Our breath is powerful.
100%. So I shared, I gave my life to Christ at 35, 2018, and I went through a spiritual kind of training course earlier this year. It was a 40-day kind of morning meditative practice where we were studying scripture, we're studying the life of Jesus and Yahweh, and the guy leading this group had us do breathing, like he called it biblical breathing, and it would be Yahweh. Yahweh. Like breathing with the voice of God. Like there's a lot of spiritual, like this is not my area of expertise at all, but I thought that was really cool and see, because I'd never seen it really discussed in a Christian space. You hear a lot in Western religions and other meditative practices, but this was cool to see it from a biblical perspective. That really, really helped me.
I can't help but think of this. I was raised Catholic, and in Catholic grade school, there was a song, Yahweh, I know you are near, standing always at my side. As you can tell, I am not a professional singer, so...
But there's even there's even more to it, right? And I'm not I don't want to make this conversation all about faith and in any of that. That's not what I'm here to do. But in Genesis, when God created Adam out of the dirt, right? He breathed into him the breath of life. Like there's so much power and meaning. I see it biblically there, just the power of what we can do with our breath.
The breath of life. And that leads me to words. When we breathe, in order to speak, we must breathe. And one of the traps I fell into, in addition to pornography, was using phone sex along with that. Not just earlier than that was phone sex, and then came the chat rooms and all that. And the words we speak are so powerful. So if you're calling yourself a sex and porn addict, this goes back to just what we were talking before, that yes, you need to admit you have a problem, but it's time to change gears. Frank, what is what's another tip, tool, technique, tactic, or life change strategy for if there's somebody listening right now and they are really struggling. They're listening to us and they're like, Yeah, but these guys are two porn addiction recovery coaches. Like this is what these guys do for a living. So, and I've been struggling with this for decades. Um, this all sounds good, and this identity change thing, and breathing, and all this, but I, I don't think there's any hope for me.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about hope or identity, words, and everything. I want to maybe give something here that I think can be truly unique in our approach. I think one thing that we're bringing kind of to the space is the integration of fitness and nutrition. If you're struggling with a compulsive behavior, what at its core is that? That's a lack of self-control, self-leadership. But if we can learn to develop self-control in other areas of our life, we can begin to identify as somebody that has control. Then we could take that identity, redirect it into the path to pursuing or transcending our porn addiction. So one of the things that we do very early on in our coaching program, and it's been very helpful for me as well, is a prolonged fast of 48 hours, literally 2 days.
That.
I want you to go without food because I think there's a lot that comes out of that. If you never, most people have gone 24 hours. There's at some point in your life where you've gone an entire day without food. So that's why I want you to extend a little bit further out. But you're going to get to a point, usually towards the end of that first day, where you do get hungry. Not ravishly hungry or like I want to eat my arm off or anything. And if that is the case, you probably have some blood sugar issues that maybe you want to get that in check first before continuing down the fast. But you're going to feel like an urge to eat. Your brain's going to send you a signal. There's the dopamine like associated with eating. So your brain's going to be like, hey, go give us these things that you're always giving us at the time. Quickly though, what you'll learn is if you can learn to suppress that hunger, that drive, that need for food is going to go away very, very quickly. And oftentimes you're going to feel a whole lot better in your ability to control yourself. Now that can become a part of your identity. Now I'm developing the skill set and ability to self-control, self-regulate myself. So if you're working down the path of overcoming your pornography addiction, most guys, it's easy in the first week or two, especially if you join a program or like you hired a coach or something. It's like, I'm doing something new now. There's adrenaline. There's other guys involved. Like I feel the support. It's usually week 3 to week 6 where the urges get too much for men to actually be able to control them. But if you had that internal thought of like, well, what I did with the fasting thing, let me just try some of these other things. Let me take my mind off. Let me go outside for a walk. Quickly, that urge is going to go away, right? Like the urge is just a feeling in the moment. You don't have to entertain it, and it's going to go away. So I think that's a real practical tool that I don't hear a lot of people talking about is the ability of using fasting as a tool to develop self-control, discipline, and willpower.
I wholeheartedly agree, and you're the only guy I listen to. I'm not putting anybody down. I listen to a lot of coaches and other programs, and frankly, Frank, you're the only person other than myself that I know that teaches that. I love intermittent fasting. I do extended fast as well, and I totally agree because if we're able to control the food part, then it becomes easier to control the porn part because we're controlling our body, just exactly like you're saying.
You're conquering the demon, conquering the dragons. And there's a second benefit that I'm just recently really beginning to understand a whole lot more, and it's connected to the gut-brain axis. So our gut health plays a massive role in our ability to produce neurotransmitters and our overall mental health. Constantly eating junk food every single day, like you have poor gut health. Like you don't eat, I don't even have to ask you that. Like I just know that. So fasting, especially a 24-hour fast, that will begin to produce some positive changes in your gut microbiome, in your gut health. And just that in and of itself is going to produce more clarity, more focus, better neurochemicals throughout your brain. So take care of the gut, the mental health side will follow.
Absolutely. And there's a whole thing on, I'm sure you know about the little microbes there are communicating with your brain, and they're like, hey, we want the junk food, we want, so absolutely. And I'm so thrilled you talk about fasting because I mean there's so many benefits. Like I feel like we've been sold this bill of goods over the years that we need a pill or a program to lose the weight or whatever. And we need programs, don't get me wrong, but this like taking a pill to deal with weight issues when, hey, why not do some intermittent fasting? What do you have to do? Well, pretty much nothing.
Not eat.
What are you gonna? And I've done some extent. I did an 11-day fast. I would have went longer, but we had a social thing coming up, and so I ended my fast. And people are like, 11 days? Weren't you going to die? No, actually, I felt really
Way
good,
better.
and my mental clarity was about better than it was ever. And so I'm so thrilled that's the part of your
Yeah,
program.
I'm definitely want to follow up with you on maybe what you were doing there. So I've been able to go 5 days twice. I never set out to do more than five. Like those were the goals that I was working towards. I haven't yet taken the leap though to go. I want to try to maybe push it to 10. So I'd be curious, maybe when you get you on the Superhuman Life, you can kind of talk about what you were doing during that time and how you were just able to stay so focused and disciplined. Because I do think at some point in the very near future, I need to really test and see what I'm capable of.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And just the benefits are so huge
Mm-hmm.
that, um, again, if you're struggling with porn, sex addiction, look into fasting. It it heals your body on so many different levels, mentally, physically, spiritually. And then go back. That's the thing with all major religions teach fasting. All of them
Yep. Yep.
goes
And it's
back
funny.
thousands of years.
Yeah, and as we're having this conversation, like I'm trying to think about like how can we bring the little angry penis guy into this conversation? It's like, when you're hungry, it's like everybody talks about like I'm hangry. Like it's almost like a thing like people wear it as a badge of honor. It's like, oh, you better feed so and so because he's gonna get really hangry down the future if he doesn't get to eat. Well, that's not a good thing. Like being hangry, like getting angry because you haven't been fed in 2 hours, it's childish behavior. Like it sounds a whole lot like pornography addiction. Like I'm gonna go seek out like pleasure in myself because I didn't get what I wanted today. And if I don't get the pleasure, I'm gonna punch some holes in some walls because I'm being a dick to the world. So yeah, I think that there's just something I just thought would be really cool to kind of bring in here.
Yeah, absolutely. Raging Richard raging for porn, or Raging Richard raging for food,
Yeah.
something to fill the void so we don't have to feel our feelings. That's
Mm-hmm.
what we ultimately need to do,
Yeah.
because our feelings are a give us direction, give us feedback on if we're going the right direction or not going the right direction. And um, fasting had lost my train of thought there, but well, anyway.
Well, fasting another benefit I feel I get out of fasting as well. And so I had Dave Asprey on the show like
Oh,
probably 18 months ago. He wrote a book called
awesome.
Fast This Way, and we were talking a lot about some of the spiritual benefits. And what fasting does is how it opens up your other senses, right? It opens up like you're feeling to feel things, see things, hear things. It's like these other what are they called? What's taste, sight? What are all those called? Taste, sight, hearing.
Our senses.
Our senses, yeah, like
Our,
it opens up like the other senses to just be way more stronger.
yeah, yeah. Because when you're not eating, and if you're like me, who would often eat um, to cover up emotions, then
Yeah.
it's like, well, I'm not eating, I'm fasting, so there are my emotions.
Mm-hmm.
What do I
Yeah.
do with them? And we talked about sitting with them earlier, sitting with your emotions,
Yeah.
feeling your emotions. Most people don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, Rich, tell us, if someone wants to learn more about you or your programs, how do they do that? Or inspire us here, or tell us about your stuff.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how inspirational a website is going to be, but you can check us out at Rebuilt Recovery. That's got all the information about me, the program, some successful stories out there. We're very active on the social media front, so YouTube and Instagram probably the two biggest places right now. Both of those can be found at Coach Frank Rich. So if you go to YouTube, just put Coach Frank Rich, you'll find our channel there. Hundreds of videos, like I said, at least one video every day since July 28th of 2020, specifically on the porn stuff. And there's years of fitness content in there as well. Instagram, Coach Frank Rich. Honestly, if you guys have questions, just reach out to me on Instagram. Just send me a DM, say, hey, I heard you on Eric's talk, with Porn Talk, and we can begin on the path of a conversation. So we do group coaching. We have programs available. I have a free book that you can get on the website as well. It's called The 7-Step Guide to Living Life Without Porn. A lot of resources, and then the podcast side, you can find us anywhere, Apple, Spotify, everywhere. That's called The Superman Life. So there's other elements that we do on the podcasting side of things, because as we talked about today, I don't think the problem with men is pornography. I think the problem's within themselves. So our conversations in the podcast go towards helping men become better in all the areas of their life: their faith, their fitness, their finances, their family life, their freedom, their hobbies. So yeah, The Superman Life on all the platforms, or connect with me, Coach Frank Rich, anywhere on social.
Awesome. Do you have any last words of wisdom? There's another guy now listening, and he's pretty despondent, feeling pretty hopeless. How many last words of wisdom?
Yeah, man. I think one of the real changes for me was hearing how many successful people in the world are struggling with this. Like it's not a problem. Yeah, I said some things with being weak and these things, but that can change. Like at your core, brother, if you're hearing this, like you are called to be strong. You were given something unique. You were put on this earth to produce something for good, for other people. And if this pornography is preventing you from doing that, you need to realize that must be the first step in overcoming that. So it can be done. Eric and myself aren't unique. Yeah, we've been able to conquer our addiction, and now we have platforms where we're helping others, but there's thousands of men. I mean, I hear it in the community every single day. I see it in the work that you're doing. I see it in all the friends that I have here in the space. That's what's been amazing about this industry for me, or this particular space, is how supportive of everybody is. I've been in a lot of competitive environments, in corporate world, in sales positions, in starting other companies. Like it was all like me against the world. I think in these communities, what we realize is the opposite of any addiction is not the sobriety aspect. The opposite of that addiction is the community and connection that you create in the path of doing it. So if you're struggling and you're isolating yourself, the first step is get into some type of community. Start having conversations, because if you're living with shame, that's one step above death, and you must get out of that state of being in order to make any progress moving forward. So know you're not alone, brother. Know that there is a path to doing this, and oftentimes you're not seeing the brighter side because of where you are, but every single one of us has something bright on the other side waiting for us. We just have to do what's necessary, take the responsibility, get the support needed. And I mean, it's changed my life, it's changed your life, and I mean, hundreds of thousands of men are succeeding. So I would actually challenge that man. If you're saying that you can't overcome this, like that's you giving yourself, like that's an ego thing. Like hundreds of thousands of men are succeeding, millions of men, like you can too.
You can too. That's a great place to stop right there. Frank Rich, thank you so much for being here. I want to close with one of my favorite quotes. It's from Zig Ziglar. He says, "You are designed for accomplishment. You are engineered for success, and you are endowed with the seeds of greatness. Go be great." Thanks for listening.